How did a man blamed for gutting his own military leadership become the architect of Hitler's downfall? It sounds impossible, almost suicidal. In 1937, Stalin purged his top generals, leaving the Red Army bleeding just years before the greatest war in history. And yet, when the dust settled in 1945, it was Soviet troops planting their flag over Berlin. So what happened? Was Stalin's victory a masterclass in leadership, or just a triumph of numbers and brutality? How did a paranoid dictator with no formal military background go toe-to-toe with the Wehrmacht and win? This isn't just about tanks and battles. This is about mind games, propaganda, brutal tactics, and cold, calculated power. The Eastern Front wasn't just a battlefield, it was Stalin's crucible. And somehow he didn't just survive, he dominated. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, the Soviet Union was caught completely off guard, and Stalin was largely to blame. Just a few years earlier, he had orchestrated the Great Purge, eliminating over 30,000 Red Army officers, including many of his most experienced commanders. This left the military crippled at the worst possible time. As the Wehrmacht stormed through Soviet territory, Stalin initially froze. For days, he retreated from decision-making, paralyzed by the scale of the disaster. Cities fell, millions were captured. By all appearances, the USSR was on the brink of collapse. And yet Stalin refused to surrender. He issued order number 270, declaring any soldier who surrendered a traitor, and later the infamous order number 227, not one step back. These were brutal, even inhuman policies, but they forced the Soviet military to stand and fight, no matter the cost. Behind the scenes, Stalin began regaining control. He reorganized the military high command and restructured the war effort. While the early months were catastrophic, this was the beginning of his transformation, from ideological tyrant to wartime leader. Stalin's transformation into a wartime strategist wasn't graceful, but it was effective. After the initial shock, he shifted gears. One of his boldest moves was evacuating entire industries east of the Ural Mountains, beyond the reach of German bombers. Over 1,500 factories were dismantled, transported, and rebuilt. It was chaotic, but it worked. Soviet tanks, guns, and aircraft began rolling out at a pace Hitler couldn't match. At the same time, Stalin centralized military authority under Stavka, the Supreme Command, and surrounded himself with capable generals like Zhukov and Vasilevsky. He didn't micromanage. He delegated, demanded results, and punished failure brutally. But this control also meant decisions were fast, focused, and absolute. His use of propaganda was relentless. Every speech, film, and newspaper framed the war as a holy struggle for the motherland. The Great Patriotic War wasn't just military. It was personal, emotional, existential. This wasn't Stalin the ideologue. It was Stalin the pragmatist. He adapted, learned from failure, and built a war engine that ran on fear, loyalty, and raw determination. While the Western Allies planned with committees, Stalin acted with force and instinct, and the tide of war began to shift. By late 1942, the Red Army was battered but learning, and then came Stalingrad, the city that would redefine the war. For Hitler, it was a symbolic prize. For Stalin, it was the hill to die on. He ordered that the city must not fall. Street by street, house by house, Soviet soldiers fought in hellish close combat. It wasn't just defense, it was bait. Then came Operation Uranus. Stalin approved a bold double envelopment plan to surround the German Sixth Army. While the Nazis were locked in street fighting, Soviet forces swept around them, cutting off their supplies and trapping over 300,000 men. It was a stunning reversal. Hitler refused to retreat. Stalin didn't need him to. After the surrender at Stalingrad, Stalin's confidence surged. He anticipated the next major offensive, at Kursk, where Germany launched Operation Citadel in July 1943. Stalin approved massive fortifications and a deadly defensive line. When the Germans attacked, they slammed into steel. The Battle of Kursk became the largest tank battle in history and a crushing defeat for the Wehrmacht. These weren't just victories, they were turning points. Stalin had not only stopped the Nazi advance, he'd set the stage for Soviet dominance. From this point on, the Red Army would push west and never look back. By 1944, Stalin's Red Army was no longer the desperate force of 1941. It was a relentless machine. The victories at Stalingrad and Kursk gave Stalin the momentum and confidence to go on the offensive. He launched Operation Bagration in the summer of 1944, crushing the German Army Group Center and liberating Belarus in one of the most devastating campaigns of the war. Stalin moved with brutal clarity. Cities were taken, often reduced to rubble. Entire populations were displaced, but with each offensive, the Red Army grew stronger. Stalin coordinated timing with the Western Allies, but always kept Soviet interests first. He made sure the Red Army would reach Berlin before anyone else. By April 1945, Soviet troops surrounded the Nazi capital. The final assault was savage. Tens of thousands died in the Battle of Berlin. But for Stalin, it was a moment of triumph. Hitler was dead. The swastika fell, and over the ruins of the Reichstag, the hammer and sickle waved. Stalin hadn't just defended his country, he'd expanded its reach and rewritten the global order. Through fire and blood, he had taken the Soviet Union from survival to supremacy. Joseph Stalin was no military genius in the traditional sense, but he was something far more dangerous, adaptable, ruthless, and obsessed with victory. His methods were often inhuman, his decisions cold and calculating. Yet without him, the Nazi war machine might never have been stopped in the East. Stalin didn't just lead the Soviet Union to victory, he reshaped the world in the process. If this story shook your view of history, hit like, subscribe, and dive deeper with us into the moments that changed everything.